Hello, everybody. I wanted to send out a quick video on the still life assignment, the two still lifes that are due. And I just wanted to go over basically why we're doing this and some of the pitfalls people run into quickly. I know I've sent out tutorials on this already, but I want to make this just go over some basics, right? And while I was doing that, you know me, it gets, I start adding, thinking of more and more things to add. But let's keep in mind the elements and the principles. I already went over this with somebody this week as far as their critiques. It's really a simple formula and it makes critiquing so easy. The elements, you use the elements. The elements are like bricks and the principles are like a wall. And it's all for a narrative, whether you're in interior design, whether you're in animation, whether you're in illustration or graphic design, whatever it is, you're telling a story. Okay. The story might be, if you're in interior design, the story might be about a calm place, or it might be about an eclectic place, right? So, line with line, look, so you just connect it. With line, you create movement. For example, there's any number of combinations here. With color, you create unity. With shapes, you create balance or pattern. So when you're analyzing like these collages or these things that are going to be coming up during the week on these little discussion posts, I want you to just look at an old masters or a painting or a photograph, whatever it is, and go, Michelangelo used line in creating, those trees, and it creates a sense of movement, which then takes you down to the focal point. Okay. Um, Van Gogh is using color, warm colors, to create a sense of unity, versus like colors that are all over the place that create variety or conversely can be incoherent. All this stuff comes in handy when you're making your still lifes. Okay. And so what I want to do is I just want to quickly make something here. And let's just use some rectilinear shapes. And I'm going to use warm colors. I personally think that we should be using color, learning about color immediately. I don't think you have to wait till color theory. All right. In my design courses that I design, week one, we talk about cools. Week two, we talk about warms. Week three, we talk about warms and cools together and how it makes you feel. Week four, we talk about complements. Week five, we talk about split complements. And it's all about how do you want to use them? How do they make you feel? So when you're talking about a still life, okay, well, the first thing is it's a space. So what kind of space? That's why I usually have people subdivide the negative space. You have a foreground and background. In a still life, you have a tabletop. Now, if you did this, if you watched this video and then you went and you just made this and made a clone of it, it wouldn't be very interesting. So remember, this is just a really basic example, okay? But let's say here's a foreground, okay? And boy, that's a bright foreground. And here's a, whoops. Here's a background. Okay. I have just created space, and I want to bring my elements and principles up here. All right? Because still life, I want to be able to talk about it when I post it next week for discussion. First thing, it's like in the Bible, what's the first thing, God did in the Christian Bible? He created space. He created the firmament out of nothing. And that's what you're doing. Now, if you look at the student examples, there's a bunch of ways. If you didn't have any subdivision of negative space, you would have a psychological space. You would have like you're dreaming and you're floating through this amorphous fog. But if you want a traditional still life, it's usually go back and look at the old masters. It's a tabletop. All right. Now, if everybody does this, it's going to look really boring. So there's a lot of different ways you can get creative. But I'm just showing you for anything you do in this course, whether it's even down towards the end of the course when we're looking at the fantasy scapes. Think about your space. Set design. This is my set. I'm Jeff Prentice, set designer. I've decided I'm going to go with this peachy kind of warm spring look, right? Okay, here's my set. It could be angular. It could be round, I could subdivide it differently, right? Okay, but I'm just doing this quickly, okay? And I'm creating different layers for everything. Now, here's the thing about, we talk about rule of thirds. Let's talk about placement, and then we'll continue talking about space. So let me bring something in here, and we'll keep it warm. Okay. We're going to keep it earthy. All right. Now, the simplest design you could make would be this. Okay, I'm done. It's 11:59 Sunday night. I got to get this done. I got a foreground, I got a background, and I got a focal point. Boom. You could post that, right? Is it an easy read? Is it like too simple? I mean, there's abstract paintings that are like that sell for millions of dollars, right? But I am not Rothko. Okay, this isn't an abstract painting; it's design. This is symmetrical. You see, it's a box. Okay, so this is the box approach. You put everything in the box, right? What I want usually in this course is I want you to expand it into a window on a world. All rules are made to be broken. You can do anything you want. But what I find is usually people tend to just want to put things in the box. So the first thing I do is I say, if you don't want it to be symmetrical, which this is like something, if you're going to do a church or a bank or something that's like solid and unmoving, you can depend on us, right? But a lot of times we want movement. So I'm going to move this off. What does that do? And you'll hear me time and time again in this course talk about the window on the world versus the box. Now all of a sudden, instead of having a bunch of stuff, a bunch of stuff. Okay, let me just copy these. So we have 4 elements, and I promise I'll make this quick. Okay, here's a still life. 4 objects in space. Probably not going to cut it unless you can really talk a good game and convince me. All right, let's move one of them off. What's the difference that you see now? Now instead of a box that has 4 rectangles in it, you've got a window on a world that has 4 rectangles. And now let me talk about scale now that we've been talking about space. I have a formula for a still life for a composition that you could pretty much pull out of your holster and use when you're in a pinch. It's big, medium, and small shapes in a subdivided space, overlapping to create depth, right? So that's the beginning. There's something to that formula that's really easy. Let's make one huge. Okay, and we'll make it slightly less saturated. All right. Boop, boop. So what's happened to this composition? All of a sudden, I have a foreground and a background. All of a sudden, I'm walking along and boom, I hit this wall. Maybe it is even a wall, but maybe I'll leave a little bit up there so it's a little more apparent. Now there's a wall there. Okay, here's my still life. Now remember, we're doing a still life too, though, which is usually objects on a tabletop. So I don't want to jump ahead of myself. I'm kind of jumping into more of a scene, a scape. So let's keep it to the still life here. But I just want to point out some things about space. Okay, let's move that guy down here. All right. Now, what do we have now? We have a big, 2 medium, and a small. You'll notice that if you go back to the beginning, there were just 4 rectangles in a row in the same space. Now we've got a foreground. You're creating the illusion. I'm creating a narrative now of a space that you can step into and you can walk through, and you have to walk past this, and then you see the narrative of the thing going on, which is why aren't we, as far as movement, this is pretty static. We do go back into space now, which is good. We have some overlapping. So what if we have some overlapping here? I'll show you how that kind of creates a sense of space. Okay. Overlapping creates depth. Now you see this, you hit this, you go behind this, and then you go back to this, right? This is no real focal point. I would play with rule of thirds here. I'd probably, be thinking about the rule of thirds, which is movement. You come in and around and through and you land. I'd be thinking like, well, maybe this guy should be, well, this guy's kind of in the way, isn't he? I want this guy to kind of be maybe, in that rule of thirds area. Okay, so what have we talked about here as far as elements and principles? We've talked about space. We've used shapes to create a sense of space, right? And we've used these shapes here to create balance. We've used different size shapes to create variety. They're similarly colored to create unity, okay? There's not that much contrast in this. There is a certain rhythm from these being the same kind of type. These are similar shapes that almost create a pattern, that create a rhythm, okay? You see how I'm using that vocabulary? That's what we want. Okay, so let's now end up with the still life. This isn't really a still life because this guy, right? I mean, I would love to create a still life. Maybe let's create a still life here, and you've got your shapes that you're cutting out. So we've got think about size, because what you're going to see in my critiques is I'm going to talk about a lot of people use same size elements. Everything's the same size. Make something huge. Make something tiny. How tiny can you make it? This guy's in the way. Okay. How tiny can you make it? This guy's in the way. Let's move him. How tiny can you make it? The computer likes to make things tiny. So, maybe you've got something here, and let's bring him up. Let's bring him up above. Let's bring him up. Okay. Now, contrast, and we have the beginning of a focal point. You move in and around and through, and you land. Sometimes the focal point, it's better to make the focal point the smallest thing. So the pitfalls I find in this assignment, aside from not posting the 2 PSD files along with the 2 JPEGs or PNGs, are same size elements, stuck in a box, clutter, there's no grouping, there's no organization, there's no movement, and there's no focal point. So here, what I've tried to do is you go past this, you come in, you swing down here, and you come around, and you land. Okay, obviously I have some dead space in here. I'm going to leave it at that, though. So this gives you something you can sink your teeth into for all the assignments for the entire rest of the course. And this gives you some idea as far as the still life, what I'm looking for in terms of applying these elements and principles to your design.